At 11:03 a.m. on September 19, 1944, Staff Sergeant Frank Thompson crouched inside the cramped, dimly lit turret of an M4 Sherman tank near the small war-torn village of Aricourt, France. The air inside the tank was thick with the metallic tang of gun oil, sweat-soaked uniforms, and the faint, lingering scent of cordite from previous firings. Thompson, a 24-year-old loader from a small steel town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, had been in combat for exactly 4 grueling months. In that time, he had participated in 12 intense tank battles, each one a chaotic symphony of roaring engines, exploding shells, and the screams of wounded men. Yet, in all those engagements, not once had his gunner, Sergeant William Crawford, spotted the enemy first. The Germans always seemed to have the upper hand, their superior optics and tactics allowing them to strike with deadly precision. Now, as Thompson watched Crawford adjust his position in the gunner's seat, his hands steady on the controls of the 75mm main gun, a chilling report crackled over the radio. 47 German Panther tanks were advancing through the misty Lorraine countryside. These Panthers were beasts, sloped armor that deflected shots like rain off a tin roof, long-barreled 75mm guns that could punch through a Sherman's hull at over 1,000 yards, and crews trained to exploit every weakness in the American armor. Thompson had been loading the gun for Crawford since their unit, part of the 4th Armored Division under General George Patton's 3rd Army, had landed in Normandy back in June. Their survival, time and again, hinged on one critical factor: seeing the German tanks before the Germans saw them. But the Sherman's gunner sight was painfully limited, a narrow field of view, barely 30 degrees wide. It was like peering through a keyhole in a vast, deadly landscape. By the time the tank commander, perched in the open cupola above, spotted a threat. Through his wider periscope and barked orders to traverse the turret, the German gunners were already lining up their shots. The results were devastating. In just the past 3 weeks, the 4th Armored Division had lost 23 Shermans to enemy fire, tanks reduced to smoldering hulks, crews trapped inside as flames consumed everything. Thompson couldn't shake the memories of the loaders he'd known and lost, men who had shared his role in the deadly dance of combat. The first loader Thompson had lost was Corporal David Kozlowski, a burly 22-year-old from the bustling steel mills of Chicago. They had trained together at Fort Knox, Kentucky, back in the States, learning the intricacies of tank warfare in the sweltering heat of summer drills. Kozlowski was a joker, always cracking wise about the easy life in a tank, but he was reliable, his strong arm slamming shells into the breech with mechanical precision. On September 7th, near a fog-shrouded hedgerow in eastern France, Kozlowski's Sherman had taken a direct hit from a Panther at 1,300 yards. The German gunner, hidden in a distant tree line, had spotted them first through superior Zeiss optics. He aimed with cold efficiency, the shell whistling through the air before slamming into the turret. The impact ignited the propellant charges stored inside, turning the tank into an inferno. Kozlowski had been in the middle of loading a high-explosive round when the shell penetrated. He died. Instantly, his body charred beyond recognition, trapped in the burning wreckage for 3 agonizing hours, as rescue teams waited for the flames to die down under enemy fire. The second loss hit even harder. Corporal James Martinez, Thompson's best friend in the unit. Martinez, a lanky 23-year-old from San Antonio, Texas, with a quick smile and dreams of opening an auto garage after the war, had survived the bloody beaches of Normandy alongside Thompson. They had shared foxholes, cigarettes, and stories of home during the long rain-soaked nights of the advance through France. On September 16th, near the village of Bisonlay, Martinez's Sherman had engaged 3 Panthers in a desperate skirmish. They managed to destroy one, the shell from their 75mm gun ripping through the German tank's engine compartment in a spectacular explosion. But victory was short-lived. A second Panther, maneuvering through a copse of trees, flanked them undetected and fired from 900 yards. The round pierced the turret's side armor like a hot knife through butter. Martinez was pulling a fresh shell from the rack when the German projectile struck him directly, killing him on the spot. His tank commander, a grizzled veteran named Lieutenant Harlan, visited Thompson 2 days later, his eyes red-rimmed from unshed tears. "If we'd seen that damn Panther just 3 seconds earlier," Harlan choked out, his voice breaking, "Jimmy would still be alive. 3 seconds, Frank. That's all it would have taken." By mid-September, Thompson had witnessed the deaths of 11 loaders in total, good men, brave soldiers, reduced to statistics in after-action reports. Each one had perished because their gunner couldn't spot the threats fast enough. The Germans had Zeiss optics that provided crystal-clear views at long ranges, while American crews relied on inferior sights that left them blind to flanks and rear. Approaches. The Sherman crews were courageous, charging into battle with the grit of men who knew the odds were against them, but courage alone couldn't overcome the brutal reality. You can't fight what you can't see. Thompson spent his off-duty hours studying how these engagements unfolded, poring over maps, debriefing with survivors, and replaying the battles in his mind. The pattern was always the same, a deadly repetition that haunted his dreams. German tanks, with their wider fields of view and better trained spotters, would detect the Shermans first. They took their time to aim, their gunners calculating windage and elevation with precision. Then they fired, their high-velocity rounds finding their marks with horrifying accuracy. The first hit often ignited ammunition or fuel, dooming the crew. Some American crews survived by sheer luck, bailing out before the tank brewed up, but most didn't. The problem wasn't the Sherman's gun. The 75mm could penetrate a Panther's armor if it hit the right spot, especially at closer ranges. No, the core issue was visibility. Seeing the target first and reacting before the enemy could. Crawford was one of the best gunners in the battalion, his aim steady and his instincts sharp, but even he was limited by that narrow 30-degree sight. It wasn't enough in the fluid, multi-directional chaos of tank warfare. Thompson knew he had to give Crawford more eyes, a way to detect threats instantly, without waiting for the commander's call. Right now, every second counted. The difference between loading another shell and dying in a fireball like Martinez. The solution struck Thompson on September 18th, during a rare moment of downtime in their makeshift camp. It was simple, almost laughably so, a mirror from his standard-issue shaving kit. The mirror was rectangular, 3 inches by 4 inches, framed in cheap metal, designed for scraping stubble off a soldier's face in the dim light of a foxhole. But Thompson envisioned mounting it inside the turret, angled to give Crawford a reflected view of the tank's rear and flanks. This way, Crawford could glance at it without lifting his eye from the main gun sight, spotting flanking threats in real time. It was a hack, a field improvisation born of desperation, but it could work. There was just one major catch. Modifying government equipment without authorization was strictly forbidden. It could lead to a court-martial, charges of destroying Army property, and severe punishment, demotion, imprisonment, or worse. Regulations were ironclad. Tanks were to remain as issued from the factory, with changes only approved through official channels. But Martinez was dead. Kozlowski was dead. 11 loaders were dead, their faces flashing in Thompson's mind like ghosts. He didn't want to become number 12. He'd install the mirror that night and test it in combat the next day. Either Crawford would see threats faster, or Thompson would die trying to make it happen. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about these forgotten heroes. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. These stories matter. The men who live them deserve to be remembered. You're part of making that happen. Thompson worked alone that night, under the cover of darkness in the maintenance area, behind the front lines. The camp was quiet after 2200 hours, the witching hour when most crews had collapsed into exhausted sleep in their tents or foxholes. The only sounds were the low hum of distant generators powering field lights, the chirp of insects drawn to the overhead bulbs, and the occasional cough or snore from a nearby bunk. The air in Lorraine during September nights was crisp and cool, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil mixed with the pervasive odor of engine oil and diesel fuel from the parked vehicles. Thompson could see his breath fogging in the chill as he gathered his tools. He pulled his worn tool bag from under his bunk, a canvas sack stained with grease and marked with his initials in faded ink. Inside was the mirror from his shaving kit, its surface slightly scratched but still reflective. Accompanying it were wire cutters with rubber-gripped handles, a pair of needle-nose pliers, several lengths of steel wire salvaged from discarded equipment, perhaps from a downed German half-track or an abandoned fence, and a small flashlight with a battery that flickered weakly, its beam casting erratic shadows. The Sherman tank assigned to his crew sat in the maintenance line about 50 yards away, its olive-drab hull silhouetted against the night sky. Thompson walked over, his combat boots crunching softly on the gravel path, the sound muffled by the damp ground. Nobody challenged him. Night maintenance was a common occurrence in an armored unit, where tanks required constant tinkering to stay operational amid the mud, dust, and battle damage. Climbing into his own tank wouldn't raise any eyebrows among the sentries or wandering mechanics. He opened the loader's hatch with a metallic creak, the hinges protesting slightly from overuse. Lowering himself into the turret, Thompson switched on the flashlight, its narrow beam jumping across the confined space. The interior was a maze of steel surfaces, ammunition racks lined with 75mm shells in various types, armor piercing with their pointed tips, high explosive for infantry support, white phosphorus that burned white-hot on impact, the massive breech of the main gun, and the gunner's seat where Crawford would sit tomorrow, his hands on the traverse and elevation wheels. Thompson needed to mount the mirror in a position where Crawford could see it without moving his head from the gun sight. The placement had to be precise, too high, and Crawford couldn't glance at it while aiming, too low, and it would obstruct his movements or the loading path. Holding the mirror in various spots, Thompson tested angles, his hands trembling not just from the cold seeping through his wool uniform, but from the weight of what he was doing. This could end his career, or worse, if discovered. After several minutes of adjustment, he settled on a spot 12 inches to the left of Crawford's seat, mounted at a 45-degree angle. In this position, the mirror would reflect the view directly behind the tank, capturing any flanking movements from the rear or sides. A quick 3-second check. That's all it would take for Crawford to spot a Panther sneaking up without fully traversing the turret. To secure it, Thompson cut 4 6-inch pieces of steel wire using the cutters, the snip, echoing faintly in the enclosed space. He bent each piece into a U-shape, forming makeshift brackets strong enough to hold the mirror against the vibrations of combat. Next came the drilling. Using a hand-cranked drill from his kit, he bored small holes into the turret wall, the bit squealing against the armored plate like a banshee in the night. He paused every few seconds, heart pounding, listening for footsteps or voices. The maintenance area was deserted, but one curious officer could spell disaster. Nobody came. Installing the brackets took 40 minutes, his fingers slipping on the cold metal, the flashlight rolling away twice and clattering to the floor. Each noise made his pulse race, visions of MPs hauling him away flashing in his mind. If an officer stumbled upon him now, the charges would be severe. Destruction of government property, unauthorized modification of equipment, disobeying direct regulations. The minimum punishment was reduction in rank to private, loss of pay, and extra duties. The maximum? Court-martial and hard labor in a military prison. But the faces of his fallen comrades drove him on. Martinez's laugh, Kozlowski's jokes, the 11 others whose names he whispered like a litany. He secured the mirror to the brackets with twisted wire, tightening it until it held firm. Testing the angle, Thompson confirmed it showed the rear view perfectly, the open hatch, the engine deck, the tracks stretching behind. Sitting in Crawford's position, he peered through the main gun sight at an imaginary target ahead, then glanced left at the mirror. He could monitor both views simultaneously, the forward threat through the sight, the flanks via reflection. It worked. A simple, elegant solution in a world of complex machinery. Thompson cleaned up meticulously, wiping away metal shavings with a rag, ensuring no evidence remained on the floor. The modification looked crude, like a homemade addition in a factory-built machine, but it was functional. The turret was already cluttered with gear. Ammunition racks, radio sets crackling with static, fire extinguishers strapped to the walls, periscopes and vision blocks. One small mirror might blend in during a casual inspection, unnoticed amid the chaos. He climbed out at 30 hours, the night air biting as he closed the hatch. Walking back to his bunk, Thompson didn't sleep a wink, lying in the dark under his wool blanket, staring at the tent ceiling. His mind raced with tomorrow's possibilities. The 4th Armored Division was slated to move out at 700, intelligence reports warning of German Panthers in the area. The 5th Panzer Army was desperately trying to halt Patton's relentless advance through Lorraine. Tomorrow would bring another tank battle, a clash of steel titans in the rolling fields. Either the mirror would prove its worth, allowing Crawford to spot threats faster, or Thompson would meet the same fate as his friends. In tank combat, there was no middle ground. You shot first, or you burned alive. At 06:15, the camp stirred to life with the rumble of engines firing up, mechanics shouting orders as the battalion prepared to roll out. The air filled with the acrid smell of exhaust fumes, mixing with the aroma of hastily brewed coffee from mess kits. By 07:12, Thompson's Sherman lurched forward from the maintenance area, its 30-ton frame, groaning as the tracks bit into the earth. The Ford GAA V8 engine thrummed with power, the tracks clanking rhythmically against the hard-packed ground. Thompson sat in the loader's position, surrounded by 76 rounds of 75mm ammunition, racked in neat rows. Armor-piercing for tanks, high explosive for bunkers, white phosphorus for creating smoke screens or incinerating infantry. Crawford occupied the gunner's seat to Thompson's right, his face set in concentration. As he adjusted his headset, above them, the tank commander stood in the cupola, scanning the horizon through binoculars. Forward in the hull, the driver and assistant driver, two young replacements from the Midwest, manned the controls, guiding the tank through the uneven terrain. 5 men, bound together in this rolling fortress, advancing toward German positions 12 miles east. The battalion moved in column formation, 18 Shermans strung out across 2 miles of French farmland. Golden fields of harvested wheat stretched on both sides, dotted with hedgerows and distant tree lines that could conceal enemy ambushes. To the north, low hills rose like silent sentinels, perfect for hull-down positions where tanks could expose only their turrets. This was ideal ambush country, the kind where Panthers lurked in defilade, their crews waiting patiently for American columns to blunder into range. Thompson kept his eyes on Crawford, wondering if he'd noticed the mirror yet. It was mounted 12 inches to his left, angled at 45 degrees, reflecting the view behind the tank. Crawford hadn't mentioned it, either oblivious or choosing to ignore the unauthorized addition. Thompson had tested it last night. Now combat would be the ultimate judge. At 08:43, the radio in the turret crackled to life, static giving way to the urgent voice of the lead tank's commander. Movement ahead, German armor, Panthers, estimate 6. Range 2,000 yards. Too far for accurate shooting with the Sherman's gun, but close enough to heighten tensions. The battalion commander ordered the column to fan out, seeking hull-down positions behind ridges or dips in the terrain to minimize exposure. Thompson's crew maneuvered to a low ridge, the tank tilting as it settled into position. The commander called out potential targets over the intercom, his voice tinny through the headsets. Crawford traversed the turret slowly, the hydraulic whine filling the space as he searched through his narrow sight. The view showed open farmland, patches of mist clinging to the ground, but no visible targets yet. The Germans were cunning, using every fold in the land, every shadow, to remain hidden until they could unleash devastating fire.